Woo, the Golden Stallion is here for you, baby. It is time for your August Star Trek update. And wow, I mean, I was really tempted. So this happened last month. You know, actually, hold on. Brian, have some fucking coffee, will you? I will. Thank you, Brian. Woo, little New England eye opener there. How about that? Oh, love that stuff. So anyway, you're not here to listen to my coffee drinking. Last month in July, I really wished that I had waited until like all the news came out of San Diego Comic-Con and so on, or, you know, and out of STLV. And I mean, there was just so much news that came out just days after that I recorded the Star Trek update. It was such a shame. So anyway, I waited until the last minute this month for August 2018 to get all of this in because there's a lot of news to talk about as far as Star Trek. We also have reviews to get into. No new novels to review. In fact, I was going to get into it. I was going to start reviewing the Star Trek Prometheus series, but I might save that for September. Partly because, well, I mean, there's a comic book series that I think is actually really important to review here, and so we'll just save reviews for another time. But there's just a shit ton of fucking news. Some of it sequels to what we've been talking about in previous Star Trek updates. So anyway, all right. Why don't we just start breaking into it? Because like I said, there really is so much to talk about for the month of August as far as Star Trek goes. And I'm going to open it up. You know, I'm not going to go into the news. Why don't we open it up with a review? So we'll get a review in. We've got one main review, one mini review, and then I want to get into a major story. There, of course, 2018 is the 20th anniversary or 25th anniversary, I guess, of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, because 93. Yeah. Okay, so that led to at Creation Entertainment's, you know, major Star Trek Las Vegas convention, which is the biggest one in the world pretty much. That led to them having a huge panel with the cast and crew, you know, of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So there were some really, really interesting nuggets of information laid out during that. And we're going to cover all that at the end of this episode. But just so you know what you got coming up for you. And of course, yes, you better believe it. We are going to talk about Patrick Stewart coming back. You better believe it. And it's happening. Woo. I will say, you know, one piece of news I'm not going to get into is the casting of Ethan Peck for Star Trek Discovery Season 2, which Season 2 should be airing in January Season 2 of Discovery should be airing in January, starting airing in January of 2019. We don't have an exact date for that, but they are saying January right now, that's when it'll start up. You know, I mean, there's a lot to talk about there. Rebecca remains Stamos, you know, Pike. I mean, they've been doing their rounds and everything as well. But getting Ethan Peck as to play Spock in Season 2 of Discovery. I talked about it because I got asked about it for a Wednesday Q&A for patrons. And like I said, I think it's a fine pick. I think the guy's downright sexy, and it's important for Spock to be sexy, in my opinion. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But just in case you didn't hear that Q&A and you're only listening to the Star Trek update, I'm very supportive of who they picked. I like the look a lot. I wouldn't have minded if they used Zachary Quinto, but I like the look that they went with for, I like the look of Ethan Peck and what he's got going on for him. So no problems there. Anyway, okay, let's get into our first review. And this is for a comic book series, a 4-issue miniseries, which has been kind of the popular thing to do for IDW, who still controls the comic book licensing, or the license for comic books for Star Trek. And even though they've been dropping titles, they dropped New Visions, they dropped Boldly Go, you know, I mean, it seems like mainly they're just doing a bunch of miniseries right now, which is fine. And some of them are Discovery miniseries. And of course, the other popular thing that they've been doing throughout 2018 is the Mirror Broken, the, you know, Star Trek The Next Generation, you know, kind of mirror universe comic book series, which we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But anyway, Star Trek Discovery Succession is a Star Trek Discovery miniseries, 4 issues, like I said, written by Kirsten Byers, which is important, okay, because Kirsten Byers she is like kind of in charge in a very real way of the writer's room for Star Trek Discovery, the television show itself. Okay, so the importance there is that you're getting the actual Star Trek Discovery writer, kind of head of writing, or at least very important in writing, working in the kind of extracurricular, expanded universe, shall we say, of Star Trek. Now, we've talked about this many times on Star Trek Updates, but the materials, this isn't true for all of Star Trek, but for Star Trek Discovery, the novels and the comic books are considered more or less canon. They're considered tie-in, okay? And so there's no need to really contradict anything that's going on. And there's a confidence in that when you get the fucking writer for the show, one of the writers for the show, actually writing the comic books themselves. So that's pretty important that Kirsten Byers is behind this. And she does tremendous work. Like her work on the relaunch, the Simon & Schuster relaunch, I think that they started, was that in 2005, with the Voyager books, is second to none. If we were to put it in Star Wars terms, Kirsten Byers is very much the Claudia Gray of Star Trek. Okay, as Claudia Gray is kind of like the top writer in Star Wars right now, Kirsten Byers is easily the top writer in Star Trek, in my opinion, right now. Not to say that Dayton Ward or David Mack don't do great work, but Kirsten is just on top of her game, and I'm glad she's still dealing in things outside of the writer's room with Discovery. Of course, I'm also glad she's in the writer's room with Discovery. So Star Trek Discovery Succession takes place entirely in the mirror universe of Star Trek Discovery, which was a major part of season 1 of Star Trek Discovery. And it takes place directly after the season finale of season 1 of Star Trek Discovery. So you're very much getting a continuation of the story. And what this has to do is, and there's going to be spoiler alerts, what this has to do with is, we know now from season 1 of Discovery that Empress Georgiou is now in the Prime universe. She's not in the mirror universe anymore. Okay, she's in the Prime universe and arguably part of Section 31. Woo! And with that in mind, now they're in the mirror universe, the Terran Empire, there's a power vacuum. Well, it turns out she has a cousin named Alexander, and he's a young person, totally a bigot. I mean, you say everybody in the mirror universe is, well, this guy's on a whole other level. He becomes emperor. And so you're finding a little bit out about his reign, but then what you find out is that the mirror Michael Burnham, okay, again, the mirror, not the Prime, the mirror Michael Burnham is actually still alive, even though in season 1 of Discovery, it was kind of a major plot point for the character, for the mirror, Gabriel Lorca, that, oh, well, I miss my Burnham and everything. She died, blah, 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 blah. So now, of course, we know that the Prime Lorca also, from the book, was it Drastic Measures? I think it was Drastic Measures. These books have similar names: Fear Itself, Desperate Hours, Drastic Measures. It's all really holy shit, everything's going to end. So I get them confused sometimes. But I think it's Drastic Measures, which is the one that came out in February that had to do with Prime Lorca. You find out that Prime Lorca is actually, at the end of that, it is assumed that he is still alive as well. So you have Mirror Michael Burnham, which could be very interesting for future episodes of Star Trek Discovery. Oh, well, wait, no. Oh, sorry. Okay. I didn't know if I was going to spoil any of this stuff. But yeah, you're not going to see Mirror Michael Burnham, or probably not anyway. So, and I'll explain why. So this series, again, 4 issues, and it's covering all that. And you have Mirror Michael Burnham, who is trying to help out the rebellion against the Terran Empire, led by other races, the Klingons and so on. L'Rell is in this. You get a lot of your characters from, that from the Prime Star Trek Discovery universe compared to the Mirror universe. You have Admiral Cornwell is in this. She returns, and you find out she's not a part of the rebellion, but she is, and she's not with Lorca's kind of rebellion either, but she is interested in it sounds very much like a Roman Empire thing where she wants to kind of elect a group of senators to turn the Terran Empire into more of a republic again until they can find a good emperor, because all of the emperors have been shit as late, apparently. So that's an interesting thing that they could have gone down that road. But this all has to do with Mirror. Really, at the end of the day, this entire story has to do with Mirror Michael Burnham reclaiming her throne from Alexander now that there's this power vacuum without Empress Georgiou around. There's a side story that has to do with the character of Arium, which becomes very important. Now, Arium is one of the most, next to, say, Saru on Star Trek Discovery, Arium is one of the most recognizable characters on the bridge of the Discovery. Arium is the robot-looking woman on the bridge. And this is also the first time, because I think there's been some confusion around what her actual name was, officially. And again, Kirsten Byers wrote this, so I'm going to assume that Arium is the official name that they're running with, and her name would be Lieutenant Arium on Discovery. There's a side story with her where she takes over the Shenzhou ship. Okay, Discovery's not really a part of the. Well, we know what happened to Discovery when you watch the Mirror ISS Discovery when you watch Star Trek Discovery. But anyway, she ends up taking over the Shenzhou. It looks like she's helping out the non-human rebels. Okay, like L'Rell, the Klingons and the Vulcans, like with Amanda Grayson and so on. And that becomes very important because Michael Burnham, in her attempt to reclaim or to claim the throne of the Terran Empire, she ends up siding with the rebels and using the rebels to effectively get her way. So now one of the ways that she's able to convince the rebels that, look, we got to do something about Emperor Alexander, who's in charge right now, which again is the cousin of Empress Georgiou, is he's going to launch a toxin. He's been developing a toxin that will kill any species other than human. And so he wants to cleanse the empire of any species that isn't human. And of course, everybody's saying, even the rebels are like, wait, he's an idiot. He can't do that because there's no empire without people to rule over. Like, you got to have these species these slaves to build your empire on top of, which, that's a historical point. But anyway, Terran Empire or Roman Empire. And so that's how they convince everybody in all these different groups, including like Cornwall, who she has her own thing that she wants to do. This is how they all end up working together, because they got to stop this toxin from getting released. So there's a point where Captain Arium, she of the Shenzhou, she ends up like stopping the toxin from getting launched on the Klingon homeworld of Kronos. And so she has one of these things. And there's a panel, I think in issue 3, where she suddenly says, hey, are my modifications done on that toxin? And you don't know what the hell it's about, but that's an important plot point. Okay. So all this bullshit happens, all these groups kind of work together, and they eventually get into the Emperor's palace on Earth itself. And Burnham ends up killing first off, she kills Admiral Cornwall, and then she ends up killing, so what she wants isn't going to happen. And the whole time Burnham is saying, oh no, I don't really want to be emperor. I don't care. I just want to make sure that Alexander, dies. Well, turns out she actually absolutely does want to become emperor, and she ends up killing Alexander and just about anybody that gets in her way. And she leaves Cole, who we remember from the House of Kor in Star Trek Discovery, and L'Rell herself, and says, all right, you're going to be the governors of the Klingon Empire. Thank you for your service. See you later. Get out of here. And so they have Burnham effectively becomes emperor, and they have this huge coronation ceremony. Tons and tons of people come to the capital, which not exactly sure where that is, but the capital on Earth of the Terran Empire. Maybe it's Rome. And they, there's a big ceremony, long live the emperor, blah, blah, blah. And then while she's on the planet, Captain Arium, she ends up launching the toxin, and it turns out she modified the toxin to kill only humans. And now Captain Arium is some kind of she's partly human in some way. Okay. Somehow, she's somehow kind of human. And even though she's mostly robotic, she must have gotten into some kind of accident. They haven't explained a whole lot around this character. I do hope that it ends up becoming more, because they're doing so much and giving her so much to do in this comic series. It'd be great to see her do something in the Prime series. And she just has such a unique look. It'd be a shame to not use that character. So she ends up killing Empress Burnham, or Empress Michael, whatever. She ends up killing, it looks like millions of people that are at this coronation ceremony with this toxin. Of course, L'Rell and Cole survive, and she survives because she's only part human. And her robot parts, I guess, protect her from the toxin or whatever. And she picks up the crown and becomes Empress or Emperor. She becomes Emperor Arium. And it kind of ends, the whole comic series ends with her. So Michael Burnham's dead. All these other people are dead. It ends up with her sitting on the throne, and it's kind of, it doesn't, I don't know exactly, she takes her helmet off, and it looks like, I don't know, she's letting her freak out, like, because she kind of removes like the parts of her head that I'm guessing are covering more the scarred parts of her humanity or something. I don't exactly understand what's going on with that, but it has her sitting like, kind of in a thinking pose, sitting on the throne of the Terran Empire, and she is now emperor. And then it ends off with a shot, interestingly, of the ISS Enterprise. Now, I think this would take place, since it's after Star Trek Discovery, and it's still, like, that is all about 9 to 10 years before the original series. It ends with a captain's log, but you don't know who the captain is. It ends with a captain's log. You're guessing of Pike, of the Captain Pike of the ISS Enterprise. Again, the Imperial Starship Enterprise in the Terran Empire. And he mentioned Spock, whoever is doing that. So it's probably not Kirk. It's probably Pike doing the captain's log. You don't know, but it ends off with the panel of the Enterprise saying, wow, this Emperor really seems to have their shit together, and this is going to be very interesting. So arguably, Empress or Emperor Arium is the Emperor during the original Mirror Mirror episode from Star Trek Discovery. And that'll be of Star Trek, the original series. So that'll be curious if at some point we get a future comic book, because we know that, we effectively know, because of the Deep Space Nine Mirror Universe episodes, that Spock ends up becoming Emperor of the Terran Empire. This will be interesting if we know the Emperor that he has to depose, and if he deposes Arium, or if Arium even gives him the reins, perhaps because of her little bit of distaste for humanity that gets put on display in the entire Succession comic book series. It's a really worthy read. All 4 issues, I think, are fantastic. I mean, I gave you the synopsis of what ends up happening in the end, but it's a well-done comic, and there's a lot to take in, and I've always said this, I'm a huge fan of the Mirror Universe, and so to get an entire, mini comic series about it was really, really cool. So I like that a lot. I recommend this. It's not the best work that IDW has done, but this is probably the best Star Trek Discovery comic book to have come out so far. Not that there's been a lot of them. We had the Light of Kahless, and then there was the annual that they did with the story around Stamets and how he got to where he is aboard Discovery, and so on. But I really, really enjoyed this comic series, and I mean, in fact, it's really so engaging. You read through it very quickly. Like, all 4 issues, you can do it in kind of one sitting, maybe an hour or 2, and I mean, you don't realize that the time passed because you're just so engrossed in what's going on, and there's so much backstabbing. Kind of what makes the Mirror Universe so exciting, right? Is because you just never know who the hell's going to die next. Game of Thrones has nothing on Star Trek's Mirror Universe in a very real way. So yeah, I totally recommend this. If you haven't read a Star Trek comic book ever, or if you haven't gotten into it, start here, because I think that, first off, this is canon for a multitude of reasons, but second off, it's just very well done. So anyway, let's move on from that. Little more Discovery news. We'll wrap up our news on Discovery here with this, or in our reviews. Star Trek Discovery Season 1, the Blu-ray. We finally have a release date. It's going to be November 13th. I already have my pre-order in on Amazon. Best Buy is going to have a steelbook version of Season 1 of Discovery, so you might want to wait for, and there hasn't been an announcement on when Best Buy is going to allow for pre-orders yet. You might want to wait for that. There is a link in the show notes that you can use that will go through stuff.sexandsciencehour.com to get Season 1 of Discovery. It runs, I think it was like $40 or $50 for Season 1, which is I know that's kind of crazy, because you can buy an entire series of Star Trek, 7 seasons, for the same price, right? As compared to the price of just one season of Star Trek Discovery. But it looks like there's a lot of great features in it, and so I can't wait to do that. In fact, I really might, part of the reason I want to get it, or that I want it kind of right away, is I do want to rewatch the show before Season 1 before Season 2 picks up, and I want to rewatch it, with other people. And so I think doing that, having it on the Blu-ray and getting that really crystalline picture would just, would be really nice to watch in that way. Because a lot of times when Season 1 was actually airing on CBS All Access, there were bandwidth issues. There was all these other fucking problems. It was such a pain in the ass to really watch it. I mean, there was a lot of times where Stephanie and I, we watch like every episode twice anyway, but that we'd have to kind of rewatch just to be able to watch it the first time. We'd have to watch it twice. Effectively. So yeah, having the Blu-ray, that's going to be a great thing. So link in the show notes for that. November 13th. I'm already on board. I can't wait. I'm excited. Okay, let's talk a little Next Generation. We got like 3 little stories here for the Next Generation. So the first bit, while we're talking about the Mirror Universe, IDW has had a real banner year with all of the series that they have been doing for Star Trek The Next Generation, where they have been, in fact, one of the series, I'm probably going to do a double review of, there was a previous series to this, and then there's this one, Terra Incognita. They're kind of sequel series to each other, where they are based around the Mirror Broken or the Mirror Universe characters for Star Trek The Next Generation, where you do have, you have Captain Picard, who's like originally captain of the Stargazer, the ISS Stargazer, then captain of the ISS Enterprise, which looks like the Galaxy X class from All Good Things from The Next Generation. And then you have, what was it, like Inquisitor Troy or something like that. But what they've been doing with the Mirror Universe with Star Trek The Next Generation has just been brilliant. This is some of the best comic books, Star Trek comic books ever done, and certainly some of the best done by IDW. Right now they're running and I think this is a 4-issue as well, it's called Terra Incognita, which has to do with Mirror Barclay getting stuck, because what was happening was in the previous Mirror Broken series, or Mirror Universe series for The Next Generation, is that Mirror Universe characters like Captain Picard and others were going into other universes, like the Prime Universe and so on, and taking ships and parts and supplies and everything from these other universes. It seems like a little bit of overkill. Like, if you have the Galaxy X class, why can't you, the Enterprise with the 3 nacelles and all that, why can't you just, take whatever you want from the Mirror Universe? So, I mean, the plot point's a little weird of why they need to do that, why they want to cross back over, but whatever, it's making for some fun reading. And so at one point, Barclay kind of gets stuck aboard the Prime Universe Enterprise D, and he is causing all kinds of trouble. I've been enjoying this so far. Again, this entire run of the Mirror Universe of The Next Generation has really, really been enjoyable. The amount of Mirror Universe content, of course, it's like the 50th anniversary of the Mirror Universe this year, I guess, as well. So that's why they claim that they're doing it. But I'm very, very pleased. Pretty much anything you're reading as far as IDW this year that has to do with the Mirror Universe has been phenomenal. So definitely check out Terra Incognita. I think that they're having a lot of fun with that. And Mirror Barclay is a pretty funny character in what he does. The best in issue 2, this is so cool. So the storyline that's happening right now in Terra Incognita is taking place in season 4. Because it's taking place after the Battle of Wolf 359, which is from Best of Both Worlds, so I guess this would be within season 3, not season 4. This is part of season 3. But they bring back the character of Sonia Gomez, who was in season 2. And, oh man. Season 3 would be season 4. Sorry. Yeah, right, Best of Both Worlds is the finale for season 3 and the opener for season 4. Sorry about the confusion there. But they bring back the character of Sonia Gomez, who I guess is in season 3 maybe, and she, like, that was such a hot character. There's so many actresses and people that the Next Generation brought in kind of as minor characters. Like, they even had Terry Hatcher, if you remember, in, I guess that was season 2 with the Outrageous Icona, and she was in other episodes. They're ripe for using to get more women characters and of course stunning ones at that, and brilliant ones. Within the Next Generation, I'm glad that the comics are picking these up. So yeah, Terra Incognita, that's a great series running so far. They're 2 issues deep, and I'm really enjoying that. So now, but as for the, I'll do a full review when that comes out. In fact, I'll do kind of a full review of the Next Generation Mirror Universe after this series comes to an end, because then I think they're kind of done with the whole Mirror Broken line after this. But anyway, here's kind of the big news to come out of to come out this year. Honestly, this is the biggest news. This is about the biggest news you could possibly make for Star Trek, no matter what it's about. This is just fucking huge. And what was announced at Star Trek Las Vegas this year in 2018 was that Patrick Stewart is going to reprise his role as Captain Picard, or as Picard anyway. We don't know that he's going to be captain. It's very skim on details, but CBS All Access is going to do a Picard TV series. I don't think it's going to be a mini series. It sounds like they're saying very point blank that this is going to be a TV series of some kind. There is a link in the show notes. You can watch the video where Patrick Stewart announces it, and it's very emotional. He starts crying. I mean, and you know, when I heard about it, I was fucking crying. I mean, it's just amazing. And I think I might have mentioned it on a Star Trek Prime episode that it was happening, but I just want to talk about it briefly here. Again, we still don't have much more in the way of details, but when you finally see the video of it, which I hadn't seen it when I first talked about it, when you finally see the video of it, like when Patrick Stewart is saying, when he says he knows just how much Star Trek and his character and his role and everything, how much it means to so many people. I mean, you just can't help but, you know, your eyes get wet. I mean, it's so heartfelt. It's so heartwarming, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful moment. I am so excited for this. I can't wait to see this. I mean, you know, a lot of people talk about how Patrick Stewart is kind of the fountain of youth and everything, and how he still looks so good. And look, for his age, you know, I mean, he's pushing 80. He does look so good. Admittedly, he doesn't look as good as he did like 5, 6, 7 years ago. He looked no different than he did in a very real way than when you saw him like in Star Trek Nemesis, or when the last time you saw him as Picard. Now he certainly does look a little bit older. So as far as what this series is going to be about, I mean, I think that there's, you know, you could just run wild. I mean, there could be rampant speculation as far as what's going to go on there. I think it would behoove them to have Data be a major part of it. And now, you know, when we got at the end of Star Trek Nemesis, they were uploading Data's like memory engrams effectively into, or there was a point, not at the end of Nemesis, but within Nemesis, Data puts his memories into B4, which is kind of an earlier version of himself, you know, of himself and lore. He's uploading kind of his own memory engrams into B4. And the movie ends with the suggestion that B4 could become Data himself, even though Data dies in Star Trek Nemesis. I mean, and certainly Star Trek comics and other, in fact, there's what's considered canon, which is the prequel to the prequel comic book series to the Star Trek 2009 film, where you find out what happened with Nero, what happened to Romulus, and how Spock ends up in the ship that Geordi LaForge designed that you end up seeing in the movie, in the Kelvin timeline and everything. In that, Data is captain of the Enterprise. So we have Data. Like, we know that Data does survive that whole instance. But I think that you could have fun with, because you can transfer effectively Data's consciousness, there's really no reason why you couldn't get a completely new actor. In fact, I think it'd be awesome for it to be a woman, quite frankly, to have a female character play the part of Data. I think that would be, honestly, I think it'd be sexy. I think that you could have a lot of fun with that. Some very interesting things could happen with it. But there's no real need to stick with the visage of Brent Spiner, or to have to bring Brent Spiner back. He certainly could not like get behind the makeup anymore. Now, they could do some de-aging. That would be probably the first time that I can think of where, if they use de-aging technology, that would be the first time it was used on a television series. I could be wrong about that. There might be one out there, because there's so many TV series where that's been done. Hell, you know, they could use de-aging tech on Patrick Stewart if they want. And I'm sure Stewart could still do all the acting and everything, and his voice sounds phenomenal. That could get interesting too. So unless they're going to start bringing in a lot of de-aging technology, okay, to, you know, kind of like what you saw in Star Wars Rogue One and Tron Legacy and so on, or Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, you know, I'd say let's do this. Let's have Data be in it, but let's give Data another, you know, let's give him another actor or actress. In fact, we'll talk about this later when we talk about the panel about Deep Space Nine, the 25th anniversary panel for Deep Space Nine. Ira Steven Burr, who was really the showrunner for Deep Space Nine, very much the guy in charge there, he talks about how they really dropped the ball with the character of Dax, both Jadzia, Ezri, and so on, where they could have really dealt with, in the 90s, they could have dealt with transgender issues. Right, where you're changing from male to female. It's like you kind of they hinted at it, but they could have gone so much deeper. And of course, Deep Space Nine was also notorious, and bravo to them. And I say notorious with as a positive for, you know, having one of the first lesbian kisses on television, and dealing with lesbianism in general. But they could have dealt with a lot of gender issues with the character of Dax. And This is another case where I think with Data, they could go down that road. They could kind of talk about transgender issues, granted from a robot perspective, but that could even get into kind of a post-gender conversation. I mean, there's really deep shit that you could go with, really deep stuff that speaks to what's going on today, to real social issues today, that this series with Picard could get into. And to have Patrick Stewart there, to kind of, to be on board with this and to present it as the character of Picard, of Jean-Luc Picard, I think that would give it a lot more weight. And people would because there's just so much respect for Patrick Stewart and for Jean-Luc Picard, that he is one of the few people on planet Earth that could present this stuff, and I think people would listen. Even though, it's within the framework of Star Trek and his character of Picard. I think that would be a really, really powerful thing. But I don't know that they're going to do that. I hope they do, but I don't know. And I can just toss out, my own ideas as far as that goes. In fact, hell, if I want, I can write this shit into my own, my fan fiction doesn't, necessarily matter, but I could write it into my own fiction, with Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers, and that could get very interesting. And now I have ideas. So anyway, and of course, for those listening to this, I don't know if before this comes out, if the last issue or the August issue of the Sovereign Tech newsletter is going to be out there. But the last part of, just to give you an update on that, the last part of Another Side of Paradise will be part of the August 2018 issue of the Sovereign Tech newsletter. And then we will move on to other stories within Forbidden Frontiers. But you're going to be getting, just so you know, you're going to be getting Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers stories and content. And oh yes, content. Going forward for a good long while. The Sovereign Universe, not that it's on hiatus at all, but just as far as what's going to be concentrated in the newsletter and some other areas, as I've said many times, it's going to be Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers for a little while. So anyway, let's with the Picard thing, so excited for the series. We have no idea when it's going to come out, but I cannot wait for it to happen, and I am going to be so on board with it, and I'm probably going to be in tears, and I'm going to need some friends around me when it comes out and we were watching it together. But anyway, here's the last bit of Star Trek Next Generation news. This is really interesting. It's called Stage 9, and the link is in the show notes for this, and it's the Virtual Enterprise D recreation project. And what these guys are doing, I believe they're out of the UK. They are using the Unity 4 engine, gaming engine, which allows for hyper detail if you put the work into it. I said Unity 4. I meant the Unreal engine, Unreal 4 engine, not Unity. They're not using Unity. The Unreal 4 engine, they are using that to recreate the entire inside and exterior as well of the Enterprise D. And they are allowing it to be used with virtual reality headsets. And they're using the Steam VR engine, which means that it's cross-compatible with just about every VR headset out there. Windows Mixed Reality, it's still not available for, and I couldn't use it on the Oculus Go yet. But you can use it with the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift. Both are compatible with the VR view of this. And they've got a lot of rooms pretty much set. You have the main bridge, engineering, sick bay. There's a shit ton. But the idea is they're creating an entire virtual Enterprise D that you will be able to walk around in. Now, you can also just download the installer and look at it, and I think they have it for Linux and Windows and, pretty much everything. And you can, just do it in 2D on your screen and just walk around. Which that's cool in and of itself, but the main winner here is going to be, effectively with the VR headset, is that you'd walk around in real time, literally the entire Enterprise D. And we're talking about a huge ship here, of course. But I think that that's really, really cool. I appreciate this, and I am definitely going to be keeping an eye on when they are completely done and when they are allowing for it to, when they have it more available for other VR headsets and so on. I have a couple links in the show notes for this, where one of them shows off a lot of pictures, like you get to see the shuttle bay, and it just looks stunning. It is so fucking beautiful, and they're really doing it. Again, it's one room at a time that they are doing this, and it's just a labor of love. They're really not making any money off of the fact. They're just doing it, and again, having a great fucking time. And they're doing the Enterprise. I'd love for them to do more ships in the future. Maybe this will inspire other people to do this sort of thing. But the Enterprise D was so well fleshed out that it's an easy one to do. Maybe the other easier one to do would be like the Voyager. It'll be intriguing to see if we end up getting that. But you have the technical manual. You have so much great resources to really do the Enterprise D with that it just makes sense that that's the ship that they're rocking. And they do allow you to fly around the ship within it. I mean, it's pretty fucking cool. You definitely want to check this out. So it's called Stage 9. Of course, that name comes from, that's where, on the lot, I guess they would have been at Paramount at the time. That's where the bridge of the Enterprise and so much else was on Stage 9. And then I think Stage 6 was what they called Planet Hell, where they would do a lot of the away team stuff on that soundstage. And yeah, just really cool. So definitely check that out. Link is in the show notes for that. So let's get on to another story here. And this has to do, we're going to give you a little update on what's happening in Star Trek movie news, because we know that there's Star Trek 4 getting made with not SD Perry, or maybe it is SD Perry. Anyway, we know Star Trek 4 is getting made. It's being helmed by a female director, which is just so exciting. But there's some trouble in paradise as far as Star Trek 4 goes, because there's some thunder in paradise, as they should say. We have a battle of two Chris's, as it were. Now, it had been rumored years ago that Chris Hemsworth would be in a future Star Trek movie to reprise his role as George Kirk, the father of James T. Kirk, played by Chris Pine. So apparently in the past month, there have been arguments going back and forth between Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pine over it sounds like just the amount of pay that they're getting. Chris Pine thinks he's the bigger actor. Chris Hemsworth thinks he's the bigger actor. One doesn't want to get paid more than the other, or one wants to get paid more than the other, and there's an argument going on back and forth between the two. Personally, I think it's all horseshit. I think absolutely Chris Pine is going to reprise his role as Kirk. I think Chris Hemsworth is going to be in the movie. Even though some people have said, well, there could be a movie made without Chris Pine. Like, we could not have Captain Kirk in it and it would still be good. I agree with that. I think you could have a Zachary Quinto-led film, having Spock, at the helm, and it would do just as well as if you had Kirk there. I really do think that, because Chris Pine's Kirk, he does a great job as Kirk, but Kirk doesn't feel as indispensable as William Shatner's day, in Star Trek. So I think an argument could be made you could do it without Chris Pine, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is just to create buzz and news around the production of Star Trek 4. That's really all that this is about. A lot of times that you get these little fights and everything. Like who was it between? Was it between Vin Diesel and The Rock? They apparently had some kind of beef on Instagram for a few months or something, and then it all turned out it was a marketing stunt for, the new Fast and the Furious movie. This shit happens. Okay, where they play these kinds of games. It's all just marketing. It's tough to even talk about news with a lot of these things because you don't know what to believe. You don't know what's real. So much of it is just marketing machine and hype that you just can't tell. So I'm not worried about this. And honestly, if Chris Pine isn't in it, like I said, I think it could still be an excellent film. Or if Chris Hemsworth isn't in it, it could definitely be an excellent film. So that's all there is to, really to say about what's happening with Star Trek movie news and the Kelvin timeline, which we're probably going to get Star Trek 4, and we might get one more movie out of that, but then I think that'll be the end of it. And by then, CBS will probably own Paramount, and then they can make whatever movies they want to make. Now, for our big story of the month, this was really something, and I'm actually reading from TrekMovie.com. I usually read from TrekCore, but a lot of the links in the show notes are from TrekCore. But anyway, TrekMovie.com. Ira Steven Behr reveals how he really wanted Star Trek Deep Space Nine to end. And then there's actually a whole bunch of this whole thing's especially if you're a big fan of Deep Space Nine. This whole article is a great read. I'm not going to read all of it because there's just a ton here, but it's pretty much a recap of that entire 25th anniversary panel and saying what various actors and actresses and producers, what they would have liked to do with the show. Like Chase Masterson talks about how she would have loved to have Lita save the day at some point and so on. I mean, there's lots of little tidbits like that. It's very, very interesting. And of course, they're talking about how, there's the upcoming Deep Space Nine documentary that I can't wait for, which is What We Left Behind. That's being worked on. But anyway, so this is, let's see. Yeah, I want to read the part particularly about what Ira Steven Behr, like I said, this is the guy that pretty much ran Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He's the guy that gave it its darker edge and said that, I don't buy into Gene Roddenberry's vision that somehow everything just, all technology magically works in the future. he said, no, this stuff has to fail. This stuff has to be broken, blah, blah, blah. And I'm guessing that's part of why they forced him to have like a Cardassian station, because if it's a Federation station, you can't have it failing like a Cardassian one would, right? But anyway, so this is the guy that's really behind the entire tone of that show, and he's really the show runner. Much like J. Michael Straczynski to Babylon 5, Ira Stephen Bear was to Deep Space Nine. But of course, he also had to ultimately answer to Rick Berman and probably Brannon Braga at the time, as far as like if he had any like really outlandish ideas. They have to agree with it first, because Rick Berman was kind of the heir to Gene Roddenberry's throne, which it's arguable how good of a job he did as far as that goes. Some people say he did great. Other people say, oh, shit. And eventually he would back off more anyway, and Brannon Braga would step in more. And, of course, there was Jerry Taylor and Michael Piller. You had a lot of people in charge there. As to where now we pretty much have, like Alex Kurtzman's like running the whole thing. He's pretty much running Star Trek. He has become the new Gene Roddenberry. It's too early to tell how well he's going to do, but he's done well in the roles that he's been in, so we'll see. But anyway, Ira Stephen Bear, he was talking on the panel, and I'm going to read it here. The final panel, this is reading from the story, the final panel of Star Trek Las Vegas was dedicated to one of the more interesting episodes of Deep Space Nine, Far Beyond the Stars. The sixth season episode was framed as a vision given to Benjamin Sisko by the wormhole alien prophets, where he was a 1950s science fiction writer named Benny Russell, who comes up with a story about an African-American commander of a futuristic space station at the of a futuristic space station. Now, this was, if you heard our Star Trek Deep Space Nine a few months ago, our Star Trek Deep Space Nine top 8 or top 3 picks that Stephanie and Ellen and I did. This was one of Ellen's top picks, was Far Beyond the Stars, and it is an amazing episode of Deep Space Nine. There's no doubt about that. Anyway, let's read on here. At the panel, DS9 showrunner Ira Stephen Bear said he was attracted to the story pitch from writer Mark Scott Zicree because of how it dealt directly with racism, as well as how it was quote, about the dreamer and the dream, and who is dreaming and what are they dreaming about, end quote. And Bear was so drawn to the story within a story that he wanted to use it again for the series finale. Again, the story within a story, right? That Benny Russell or whatever is actually writing Deep Space Nine. That's kind of the idea. Telling the Vegas crowd of his radical idea on how to end the series. So here it is. I'm going to read it. This is how Ira Stephen Bear wanted to end Deep Space Nine. He says, I did a pitch to Rick Berman that the final episode would end up with Benny Russell on stage 17 at Paramount, wandering around the sound stages, realizing that this whole construct, this whole series that we had done for 7 years was just in Benny's head. That is how I wanted to end the series. And Rick said, quote, does this mean the original series was in Benny's head? Does this mean Voyager was in Benny's head? End quote. I said, quote, hey man, I don't care who's dreaming those shows. I only care about Deep Space Nine. And yes, Benny Russell is dreaming Deep Space Nine, end quote. He didn't go for it. And that's the end of like what he wanted. So Ira Stephen Bear effectively wanted Deep Space Nine to end as if it were all a dream in Benny Russell's head. And maybe, walking around stage 17 of Paramount is him, maybe being Benny Russell being the showrunner and writer for this Deep Space Nine show that's getting produced. And it's finally he's finally getting the recognition and he's getting to write the show. How do I feel about this? I kind of agree with Rick Berman. Like, it's clever in one sense, and everybody remembers the season of Dallas where it was all a dream. They kind of redid the whole thing and it was all a dream. I don't like this sort of thing. I like meta stories being told. I like stories being told within a story. That can be very interesting, but I think the stories within a story I don't necessarily like the opposite direction, where the show that you're watching is apparently all in somebody's head. I like better where a show explores something that's in the head of somebody that's in the show. Like, I like that direction, but the opposite direction, so not so much. Okay, now, the episode Far Beyond the Stars was phenomenal. Again, it really did address issues of racism and so on. Very powerful television. I'm really glad that exists. I don't mind that they did that, but I gotta admit, I'm kind of with Berman on this one, where, okay, but this just suddenly raises all of Star Trek. It just puts it all up in the air. In fact, it kind of reminds me of a theory that annoys the fuck out of me. The theory that Star Trek Enterprise, okay, that entire show, the theory goes is that that's all a holodeck program that Riker is using aboard the Enterprise D, which, that gets based upon the very last episode of Enterprise where you have Troy and Riker and like it's season 5 or something of Star Trek The Next Generation, and they're walking around on a holodeck program. That annoys the hell out of me because that's so disrespectful, honestly, to the writers, to the actors, to the crew, to people that put their fucking hearts into that show, to just somehow say, well, it's actually all just, it's not, because this is the thing, is they're saying, well, this is why there's discrepancies based upon what was said in The Next Generation. Like, people will say, well, because Worf said that we didn't get phasers until the 22nd century, how do they have phase cannons aboard the NX-01 Enterprise? Well, that's because it's an imperfect version of history because it's a holodeck program that Riker and Troy are going through. I think that's so fucking annoying, and that really, like, Chef the whole time, who has been talked about since episode 1 of Enterprise, was actually Riker the whole time, throughout that entire 4-year run. It's disrespectful that they did the Riker and Troy thing in the last episode to begin with, but it's doubly disrespectful to say that the whole show was effectively a dream, or that the whole show was effectively a holodeck program. I feel like this is kind of the same thing, is that, as powerful and as great a character as Benny Russell was, okay, it's not as insulting anywhere near as much as the last episode of Enterprise. I feel like it's a little insulting to just say, like, oh yeah, all this great stuff that you experienced, yeah, it was all just in this guy's head and blah, blah, blah. And you don't get to, like, treat it as kind of canon within Star Trek, and you don't get to treat all these incredible moments as something that you can kind of, relive as part of Star Trek's history. I don't dig it. I appreciate it. It would have been very bold if they did it. I would have lived with it, of course, and Deep Space Nine would still be just one of the best TV shows ever made. I won't take that away from it. But I think that Rick Berman made the right call, saying, no, we're not doing it. We're gonna keep this universe building on, as we planned, as they were planning at the time. So that was interesting. A couple other interesting nuggets within that you can read about, particularly like the aforementioned, where I said that like Ezri and the character of Dax, they could have dealt with transgender issues, and Ira Stephen Bear feels bad that he didn't get into it. There's stuff from Vic Fontaine where he wished that he, kind of fell in love and, had a love interest of some kind. Avery Brooks was not, speaking of the guy that even played Benny Russell and of course Captain Sisko, Avery Brooks was not at this at all. And again, like I said, I think he's kind of like lost his mind. I hate to say it, but it's a shame because he's such a great actor. But he's kind of off. If you watch the documentary The Captains, you'll see exactly what I mean. So, but very interesting stuff, and interesting tidbits to take away from that. It is interesting to hear how that show, for Ira, how it should have ended. Again, I'm very glad that it did not end that way, because it would sort of feel like an insult. Again, as powerful as Far Beyond the Stars was, definitely, Ellen was right. It's one of the best episodes of that series ever made. But to bring it back like that, and I don't think people would have gotten it. Like, I don't think they would have understood, if that's what they did, because you'd have to think back to that episode, which wasn't in season 7. It was in season 6, so I guess it wasn't that far back. But you'd still, I think people would have left it confused. They would have been like, what the hell was that? That just didn't make any sense. So not the way to wrap up a show, in my opinion. The way to wrap up a show, I think the best way to do a finale, I'll tell you what I think. I think the best way to do a finale is to have your characters, and you do a Babylon 5 style, which of course Deep Space Nine copied Babylon 5 right and left. The religious aspects, all of it. The space station, the whole thing. Babylon 5 ended with doing an episode that was effectively like 20 years in the future. But it's all the characters from the show, and it's 20 years in the future. Okay? I think that's how you end just about any show, is that you do a last episode where you find out, okay, where's everybody 20 years later? You don't end it with the present time frame that you've been making the show within. You end it off somewhere in the future, and you get to kind of see the final fates of a lot of your characters. And there's still plenty of stories to tell within a 20-year time frame, of course. It's not like you're hampering yourself from doing novels or comics or something that could explore what these characters go through after a television series ends. I think that's your capstone. is that you do a 20-year in the future episode. And if I was ever to put an end to like the Sovereign Universe or anything that I'm writing, or like Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers or something, I would do the very same thing. I would do a 20-year, capstone. And in fact, really, the Patrick Stewart led Jean-Luc Picard series could very much be that 20-year in the future capstone. And that could be putting an end to the Next Generation, right? In fact, even the Next Generation kind of did that, right? With All Good Things, where it ends up 20 years in the future, and you have like the Galaxy X class. You find out Riker's admiral. Beverly Crusher has her own ship. Worf has gone back to the Klingon Empire and so on, and you kind of get that, even though that wasn't like a definitive future. That's how you pull it off. All Good Things did it right. Even though it wasn't like finalized, because one could argue that was in Picard's head in a way. That's how you do it. So I would have loved to have seen Deep Space Nine sort of do that. They kind of did it with, the season 7 opener, where Jake is very old and everything, but that's how I would have pulled it off. So anyway, that's it for your Star Trek update. Of course, we'll get into one in September. We'll see what we can make happen with that. I would love to have other people on the show for the Star Trek update in September and talk about various things. I might get into reviewing the Prometheus books in the September Star Trek update. If not, I'll definitely do it for October, and then the third book of the Prometheus trilogy will be coming out towards the end of this year, and I can definitely do a full review then. And we'll talk some comics and everything else, but we'll see what we can do for the September Star Trek update. Maybe it'll be a little bit of a surprise. So that's it for your August Star Trek update, though. More episodes to come out every day through the end of August 2018, and I will see all of you on the other side.